that section. Now let's move on to section verses 2 through 6. Verse 2. And I went up by revelation and communicated unto them that gospel which I preached among the Gentiles, but privately to them which were of reputation, lest by any means I should run or had run in vain. Paul recognized that he were that if he were preaching a different gospel from what the other apostles were preaching, there was something radically wrong. Paul was willing to admit, if I were preaching a different gospel, I would be wrong. I have run in vain. I have certainly been disillusioned and misinformed. So he goes to Jerusalem and communicates that gospel to the apostles there. Verse 3. But neither Titus, who was with me, being a Greek, was compelled to be circumcised, that because of false brethren unaware brought in, who came in privately to spy out our liberty, which we have in Christ Jesus, that they might bring us into bondage. Out where Paul was preaching, some folks had come into the church under false colors. Apparently, they were not believers. They just came in to spy out the liberty which believers had in Christ. They found out that this young preacher, Titus, was a Greek, and Paul had not compelled him to be circumcised. So, what will the church in Jerusalem decide about him? Paul says, well, they didn't compel him to be circumcised. They didn't listen to the false brethren. If they had, we would be put right back under the bondage of the Mosaic law, rather than enjoying the freedom by the Spirit of God and the freedom in Christ. Verse 5, to whom we gave place by subjection. No, not for an hour, that the truth of the gospel might continue with you. Paul stood by his guns. These false brethren said, this man Titus, who is here meeting with the church, and it is practically all Jewish then, has not even been circumcised. Paul says, no, and he's not going to be circumcised. He is as much a believer as any of you. He has been saved by faith apart from the law, and he is not about to follow any part of the law for salvation. This is a tremendous stand that Paul is taking. Verse 6, but of these who settled to be somewhat whatsoever they were, it maketh no matter to me. God accepteth no man's person. For they who seemed to be somewhat in confidence added nothing to me. Paul says we sat down with the apostles, at least he did, and I suppose Barnabas and Titus were there also and communicated the gospel. They said, now, Brother Paul, we've been hearing these reports. Tell us what you preach. And Paul told them. And Paul finds out that these apostles didn't have anything to add to what he was preaching. He was preaching the grace of God. They were preaching the grace of God. They find that they are in full agreement. They all are preaching the same gospel. That is tremendous.